I, Darius Cole, envisioned a life of tranquil Saturdays, the kind where sunlight dripped through leaves and the only sound was the gentle hum of nature. My dream led me to this quiet cul-de-sac, a haven seemingly untouched by the chaos of city life. The two-story house with the big yard was the embodiment of that vision. My dog, Buster, a golden retriever with an unnervingly human-like understanding of my emotions, seemed to approve of the new digs instantly. The layout was ideal, spacious, bathed in natural light, and perfectly suited for a bachelor and his furry companion. Initially, the neighbors appeared to be an added bonus. Friendly waves, polite nods, and the occasional offer to help unpack. All signs pointed to a welcoming community. Little did I know, a storm was brewing, disguised in platinum blonde hair and a perpetual sun hat. Karen, as she was known, resided merely 3 doors down. From the moment I moved in, a palpable sense of disapproval radiated from her general direction. Her initial inquiries, veiled in a thin veneer of neighborly concern, were loaded with subtle, yet unmistakable undertones of suspicion and prejudice. "Are you renting short-term?" she'd inquired. Her eyes narrowed, despite the fact that I visibly owned the property, deed in hand. Another time, she'd paused to scrutinize my slightly older but perfectly functional sedan. "Does that car really belong in this neighborhood?" she'd drawled, the implied judgment hanging heavy in the air. It was clear from these early interactions that Karen had a preconceived notion of who belonged in her meticulously curated suburban paradise, and I, a single black man with a perfectly maintained lawn, did not fit the mold. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to small-town mentality, or perhaps just general nosiness. I made an effort to be cordial. I waved whenever our paths crossed, diligently kept my yard trimmed and manicured, and even, in a moment of misguided optimism, offered to help her carry her groceries from her SUV. She'd responded with a curt, "I don't need assistance," her tone laced with an unmistakable disdain. I took the hint. My attempts at neighborly goodwill were clearly unwelcome. So, I resigned myself to a policy of polite distance, hoping that her initial hostility would eventually dissipate. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. An uneasy truce settled over our relationship. I focused on settling into my new home, enjoying my newfound peace, and ignoring Karen as best I could. Life was, for the most part, good. Buster and I enjoyed long walks in the neighborhood, explored the nearby parks, and relished the quiet. Evenings on the porch, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. My dream of peaceful suburban living was, for the most part, coming true. The idyllic bubble burst, however, with the installation of a backyard sprinkler system. I had meticulously planned the irrigation, ensuring even coverage and minimal water waste, mindful of the environment and my water bill. The system was designed to keep my lawn lush and green during the dry summer months, a responsible and aesthetically pleasing addition to my property. Suddenly, Karen reappeared, a platinum blonde fury unleashed. The sprinkler system, it seemed, had triggered some deep-seated neurosis within her. She began a campaign of relentless complaints, accosting me at every opportunity with accusations of wasting water, being unneighborly, and draining the street's resources. The hypocrisy was astounding, given that her own lawn, a meticulously manicured expanse of verdant perfection, resembled a golf course and was irrigated by a complex system with 6 independent zones. Her water consumption likely dwarfed mine, yet she chose to focus her ire on my perfectly reasonable and well-maintained sprinkler system. I tried to reason with her, explaining the efficiency of my system and the importance of maintaining a healthy lawn during the drought, but my words fell on deaf ears. She was convinced that I was single-handedly responsible for depleting the town's water supply, and nothing I said could sway her. Her complaints escalated, becoming more frequent and more aggressive. She left notes on my doorstep, peppered with passive-aggressive accusations and veiled threats. She even started monitoring my sprinkler usage, timing my watering sessions, and documenting the frequency with which I dared to hydrate my lawn. I tried to ignore her, to dismiss her behavior as mere eccentricity, but her constant harassment was becoming increasingly disruptive. I began to dread leaving my house, knowing that she might be lurking around the corner, ready to pounce with another barrage of complaints. The peace I had sought in this quiet cul-de-sac was rapidly unraveling, replaced by a growing sense of anxiety and frustration. The platinum blonde nightmare had truly begun. Ignoring Karen, despite her relentless campaign, became my strategy. I reasoned that engaging with her would only fuel her fire, validating her sense of self-importance and encouraging her harassing behavior. I continued to use my sprinkler system responsibly, adhering to all local regulations and mindful of water conservation. The green lawn, a testament to my efforts, was a small act of defiance, a quiet assertion of my right to enjoy my property as I saw fit. Until one fateful morning, I walked outside to a stark and unsettling reality. Nothing. Silence where there should have been the gentle hiss of the sprinkler. A dead stop to the symphony of suburban hydration. No water emerged from the hose when I turned it on. The toilets refused to flush, mocking me with their dry emptiness. The sinks remained stubbornly parched, offering no solace. My entire house was bone dry, a domestic desert in the middle of a seemingly well-watered oasis. My initial thought was a burst pipe. It was the most logical explanation for the sudden and complete lack of water. I embarked on a thorough investigation, meticulously checking every faucet, pipe, and connection, both inside and outside the house. I scoured the basement, crawled under the crawl space, and examined every inch of visible plumbing. But there were no leaks, no cracks, no telltale signs of a water main break. Everything appeared to be in perfect working order, except for the glaring absence of water. Puzzled and increasingly concerned, I ventured to the side of the house, where the main water shutoff valve was located. This was the point where the municipal water supply entered my property, the gateway to the liquid lifeline that sustained my household. My heart sank as I approached the valve. Something was amiss. The lock I had installed on the shutoff valve, a simple security measure to prevent tampering, was gone. Vanished. In its place, a scratch marred the surface of the pipe, a fresh wound in the metal. The ground around the valve was disturbed, bearing the unmistakable imprint of muddy footprints. And then I saw it. Partially concealed beneath a nearby shrub, a full, unopened bag of trail mix lay abandoned, its contents a tempting blend of nuts, seeds, and dried fruit. Next to the trail mix, a pair of broken sunglasses lay scattered, their lenses shattered, their frames twisted and bent. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, forming a disturbing picture of deliberate sabotage. The missing lock, the scratch on the pipe, the muddy footprints, the trail mix, the broken sunglasses, all pointed to a single, undeniable conclusion. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. It was Karen. Who else could it be? Who else had the motive, the opportunity, and the sheer audacity to commit such a brazen act? The image of her platinum blonde hair, her perpetually disapproving expression, and her relentless complaints about my sprinkler system flashed through my mind. It all made sense. She had taken matters into her own hands, crossing the line from mere harassment to outright vandalism. She had deliberately shut off my water supply, attempting to punish me for the perceived offense of watering my lawn. The anger surged through me, a potent cocktail of frustration, resentment, and disbelief. I couldn't believe that someone would stoop so low, that a neighbor would intentionally deprive me of such a basic necessity, but I also knew that I couldn't let her get away with it. This was not just a petty act of spite. It was a serious violation of my property rights and a blatant disregard for my well-being. I needed to take action, to hold her accountable for her actions, but I also needed to be smart about it. I couldn't simply confront her directly, accusing her of wrongdoing without any concrete evidence. I needed to gather proof, to document the damage, and to present my case in a calm and rational manner. I took photos of the damaged lock, the muddy footprints, the trail mix, and the broken sunglasses. I carefully collected the evidence, placing it in a sealed bag. I then called the water company to report the issue, explaining the situation and requesting an investigation. While the water company dispatched a technician to assess the problem, I started brainstorming a plan, weighing my options, and carefully considering my next move. A sweet revenge would be to expose Karen's behavior, but I wanted to do it in a way that was both effective and satisfying. The platinum blonde nightmare had escalated into a full-blown crisis, and I was determined to resolve it, not just for myself, but for the entire neighborhood. Here's where the story transcends mere neighborly dispute and enters the realm of legendary suburban chaos. Karen's actions didn't just inconvenience me. They unleashed a chain reaction of epic proportions. You see, in her misguided attempt to target my water supply, Karen had overlooked a crucial detail: the interconnectedness of the neighborhood's water system. She, in her ignorance, imagined my water line a singular entity, untouchable by anyone else. Apparently, she operating under an assumption, one born of utter disregard for the way municipal services are actually designed, thought she could somehow isolate my supply without affecting anyone else. She envisioned a surgical strike, a precise cut to my water lifeline, leaving the rest of the neighborhood untouched. She couldn't have been more wrong. Unbeknownst to her, the row of houses on my side of the street, including hers, were all connected to a shared utility hub located underground. This hub served as a central distribution point, regulating the water pressure and flow to multiple properties. By tampering with the main shutoff valve for my house, Karen had inadvertently disrupted the entire system, effectively cutting off the water supply to a significant portion of the cul-de-sac. The consequences were immediate and widespread. Within a mere 45 minutes, the street erupted in a cacophony of complaints and bewildered outrage. People emerged from their homes in various states of undress, some still clad in bathrobes, others with toothbrushes in their mouths, their faces lathered in shaving cream. The morning routines of the entire neighborhood had been brought to a screeching halt, leaving residents stranded in a state of bewildered discomfort. Greg from next door stumbled out of his house, clutching a coffee pot filled with dry grounds, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No water," he exclaimed, his voice cracking with desperation. "How am I supposed to make my coffee?" The injustice of it all was etched on his face. Mrs. Lynn, a sweet elderly woman who prided herself on her immaculate garden, rushed outside in a panic, her eyes darting frantically over her wilting flowers. "My garden!" she cried, her voice trembling with distress. "It's dying." Her husband, a retired colonel known for his fiery temper, emerged from the house, his face flushed with anger. "I'm calling the governor!" he bellowed, his voice echoing through the cul-de-sac. "Someone is going to pay for this." Amidst the chaos and confusion, Karen sat serenely in her lawn chair, sipping iced tea, an unsettlingly smug expression gracing her face. She observed the unfolding drama with detached amusement, seemingly oblivious to the havoc she had wreaked. When confronted with the escalating crisis, she feigned innocence, blinking innocently and uttering the most audacious of lies. "There was a leak," she declared, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I was just trying to help." Helping. The sheer audacity of her statement was breathtaking. She, who had deliberately sabotaged the water supply, dared to claim that she was acting out of altruism. It was an insult to everyone's intelligence, a blatant attempt to deflect blame and avoid responsibility. It was also a testament to her complete ignorance of how water main systems actually worked. She clearly had no understanding of the interconnected nature of the utility infrastructure, nor did she seem to care about the consequences of her actions. Fortunately for the neighborhood, but unfortunately for Karen, one of the houses down, the street was equipped with a smart meter alert system. This sophisticated device was designed to monitor water pressure and flow, automatically sending a notification to the homeowner in the event of any anomalies. The moment the water pressure dropped below a certain threshold, the system sprang into action, sending a ping to the homeowner's smartphone. Within minutes, the HOA president, a stern and efficient woman named Ms. Davies, arrived on the scene, armed with a clipboard and a look of righteous indignation. She immediately took charge, launching a full-scale investigation into the cause of the water outage. The truth, as they say, was about to bubble to the surface. Ms. Davies, the HOA president, was not one to be trifled with. A retired lawyer with a penchant for meticulous record-keeping and a zero-tolerance policy for rule-breakers, she approached the water outage investigation with the same rigor and determination she had once applied to complex legal cases. She quickly established a perimeter around the affected area, cordoning off the main shutoff valve with yellow caution tape. She interviewed residents, meticulously documenting their accounts of the morning's events and examining their properties for any signs of leaks or damage. Meanwhile, a team of technicians from the water company began excavating the shared shutoff system, carefully digging through the earth to expose the underground infrastructure. It didn't take long for them to discover the evidence of foul play. The lock on the main shutoff valve had been forcibly removed, its shackle twisted and broken. Fresh tool marks marred the metal casing of the valve, indicating that someone had used a wrench to manually turn it off. And then they found it. A collection of incriminating items scattered around the scene. There were snack wrappers, crumpled and discarded, bearing the unmistakable logo of a popular brand of trail mix. There was a half-empty can of Diet Coke, its contents long since evaporated, leaving behind a sticky residue. And then, there was the pièce de résistance, a discarded, peanut-containing trail mix. The trail mix was the smoking gun, the final piece of evidence that exposed Karen's treachery. Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Karen's severe peanut allergy. It was a well-documented fact, a constant source of anxiety for her and her family. She carried an EpiPen with her at all times and obsessively checked food labels for any trace of peanuts. The presence of peanut-containing trail mix at the scene of the crime was irrefutable proof of her involvement. The HOA president, her eyes narrowed, turned her gaze towards Karen, who was still perched smugly in her lawn chair, sipping her iced tea. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, her voice cold and accusatory, "can you explain to me why there is peanut-containing trail mix next to the damaged water shutoff valve?" Karen's face paled. Her smug expression faltered, replaced by a look of panic and desperation. She stammered, searching for an explanation, but her words tumbled out in a disjointed stream of denials and half-truths. I don't know," she sputtered. "I would never touch anything with peanuts. I'm allergic." Her protestations fell flat, drowned out by the collective murmur of disbelief from the assembled neighbors. The evidence was overwhelming. The case was airtight. Karen was caught red-handed, or rather peanut-handed, and then the karmic wheels began to turn. 10 minutes after the HOA confrontation, Karen began to exhibit the unmistakable symptoms of an allergic reaction. Her skin flushed bright red, her eyes watered, and her face began to swell. Hives erupted across her body, itchy welts rising on her arms, legs, and neck. She gasped for air, her breathing becoming labored and wheezy. Panic seized her as she realized the gravity of her situation. She had inadvertently triggered her own peanut allergy, exposing herself to a potentially life-threatening reaction. She clutched her throat, her eyes wide with terror. "I'm being poisoned," she shrieked, her voice hoarse and strained. "Someone is trying to kill me." The neighbors, initially sympathetic to her plight, exchanged skeptical glances. They had just witnessed her blatant attempt to sabotage the water supply, and they were not inclined to believe her claims of being poisoned. However, they couldn't deny the severity of her allergic reaction. Her husband, a mild-mannered man who seemed perpetually bewildered by his wife's antics, rushed to her side, frantically searching for her EpiPen. He found it in her purse, but his hands trembled so violently that he couldn't administer the injection. Finally, after a series of fumbled attempts, he managed to inject her with the life-saving medication. The EpiPen provided temporary relief, but it was clear that she needed immediate medical attention. With a flurry of hurried movements, he bundled her into their old Buick, her sun hat lopsided, one sandal missing, and sped off towards the nearest hospital. The sight of Karen being driven away in her old Buick, her sun hat askew and one sandal missing, was a moment of vindication for the neighborhood. It was a visual representation of her downfall, a symbolic farewell to the reign of platinum blonde terror. But the story didn't end there. The aftermath of Karen's suburban sabotage was a period of collective catharsis, a chance for the community to come together and heal from the wounds she had inflicted. The next morning, something magical happened. Overnight, a silent army of justice mobilized, decorating every lawn on the street with small handmade signs. Each sign bore the same message, emblazoned in bold letters: "Do not hydrate without authorization, courtesy of Karen." The signs were a subtle yet effective form of public shaming, a gentle reminder of Karen's misdeeds and a testament to the neighborhood's resilience. Greg from next door, the coffee-deprived casualty of Karen's waterless rampage, took the initiative to create custom stickers bearing the same message. He distributed them to the residents, encouraging them to display them on their mailboxes, garbage cans, and even their cars. I, of course, proudly affixed one to my sprinkler system, a permanent symbol of my triumph over Karen's tyranny. The HOA, initially hesitant to take a firm stance against Karen, citing concerns about potential legal repercussions, were eventually swayed by the overwhelming sentiment of the neighborhood. They issued a formal letter of reprimand, outlining the severity, of her actions and warning her against any future acts of vandalism or harassment. Karen, humbled by the public shaming and chastened by the HOA's rebuke, retreated into her house, becoming a virtual recluse. She stopped talking to everyone, avoiding eye contact with her neighbors and rarely venturing outside. Her once meticulously manicured lawn, a symbol of her suburban pride, began to wither and fade, a slow and tragic death that mirrored her own social demise. The HOA also levied a fine to cover the costs of repairing the damaged water shutoff system. The fine was substantial, a significant financial burden that Karen was ill-equipped to handle. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of her relentless harassment and her deliberate sabotage of my water supply. She had brought this upon herself. In an act of anonymous generosity, I donated exactly the amount of the HOA fine to cover the repair costs. I couldn't resist adding a small note to the donation, signed simply as a grateful neighbor. It was my way of bringing this chapter to a closure. My act freed the HOA and the neighborhood to focus on moving forward. The act, while anonymous, was my way of ensuring that the repairs were completed promptly and efficiently. I wanted to put the entire ordeal behind us, to restore peace and harmony to our quiet cul-de-sac. Most importantly, I wanted to send a message of karma back to Karen, who would undoubtedly realize that I orchestrated the anonymous payout. A poetic message on the effects of kindness. With the water system repaired and the financial burden lifted, the neighborhood began to heal. The "do not hydrate without authorization" courtesy of Karen signs remained on the lawns for a few weeks, serving as a constant reminder of the chaos that had unfolded. Gradually, however, they began to disappear, taken down by residents who were ready to move on and forgive, but not forget. My sprinklers, once a source of contention, now ran twice a day, bathing my lawn in a refreshing spray of water. My water pressure was perfect, a testament to the effectiveness of the repairs and a subtle act of defiance against Karen's attempts to deprive me of this basic necessity. And Karen? She remained a shadowy figure, a silent observer lurking behind the closed curtains of her house. I would occasionally catch glimpses of her peering through her blinds, her platinum blonde hair barely visible against the darkened interior. Her gaze was always fleeting, a furtive glance that betrayed a mixture of curiosity, regret, and perhaps even a hint of envy. She hasn't touched a wrench since the day of the suburban sabotage. The lesson, it seems, had been learned. Whether it was the fear of further public shaming, the threat of legal action, or simply the weight of her own guilt, she has refrained from any further acts of vandalism or harassment. The peace I had sought in this quiet cul-de-sac had finally been restored, albeit after a tumultuous journey. The platinum blonde nightmare had subsided, replaced by a sense of quiet contentment and a renewed appreciation for the bonds of community. I learned valuable lessons about the importance of standing up for what is right, the power of collective action, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. I also emerged from the ordeal with a newfound sense of humor, able to laugh at the absurdity of the situation and the sheer ridiculousness of Karen's behavior. Life in the cul-de-sac settled into a comfortable rhythm. The sound of lawnmowers filled the air on Saturday mornings. Children played in the streets after school. Neighbors gathered for impromptu barbecues and potlucks. The cul-de-sac, once fractured by Karen's actions, had become a stronger, more united community. And me? I continued to enjoy my peaceful suburban existence, with Buster by my side and my sprinklers diligently hydrating my lawn. Every time I saw Karen peering through her blinds, I couldn't help but smile. I knew that I had won, not through malice or vengeance, but through resilience, humor, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The platinum blonde nightmare was over, and the sprinklers of justice had prevailed.